Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to replace the rear brake pads on a Honda S2000. The first thing you want to do is get the rear of the car on jack stands, remove the wheels, and release the e-brake. Next, remove the two caliper guide pin bolts holding the caliper in place with a 12mm box end wrench and a 17mm open end wrench. Place a 17mm wrench onto the slide pin and hold it in place while using the 12mm wrench to loosen the bolts. You might want to use a rubber mallet to break them loose, as it can be difficult to get leverage. Pull the caliper off and place it somewhere where it won't hang by the brake line. Pull the old brake pads out. At this point, you can optionally measure the rotor width to see if they need to be replaced. The service limit for the rears is 10mm. Remove the slide pins from the caliper carrier and clean them. I recommend doing them individually because the top and the bottom slide pins are different, and if you mismatch them, you're going to have a bad time. If you mix them up, you can identify the bottom slide pin as the slide pin with the flat edge. Remove the carrier boot, lubricate the slide pins, and insert the lubricated slide pins into the caliper carrier to lubricate the inside of the caliper carrier. Finally, reinstall the carrier boots and reinstall the slide pins. It's finally time to install the new brake pads. Grab your brake pads and apply some brake lubricant to the backing plates to prevent against unwanted noise. Be careful not to get any lubricant on the friction material. Now you'll have to retract the brake caliper piston so that the caliper will fit around the new pads. This process is slightly different from the front since the rears must be rotated back into place instead of simply being pushed. Use a 3/8 ratchet on the center of the rear brake caliper piston and rotate the piston clockwise to retract it. You will need to retract the piston to a perfectly aligned position so that the rear brake pads will correctly slip into the piston grooves. If you don't do this correctly, it will be difficult to get the caliper back on. If you are still able to get the caliper back on, the brake pads will wear at an angle, so make sure the piston is aligned correctly. Keep note that pushing the piston back will also push fluid back up the brake line, so make sure to keep an eye on your brake fluid reservoir. Reinstall the brake caliper and reinstall the two caliper guide pin bolts holding the caliper in place with a 12mm box end wrench and 17mm open end wrench. Place a 17mm wrench onto the slide pin to hold it in place while using a 12mm wrench to tighten the bolts. Torque them to 17 foot-pounds. At this point, you're almost done. The last thing that I like to do before finishing up is to pump the brakes so that the caliper is actually contacting the pads. If you don't do this, the car could roll away when it gets back down onto the ground. Finally, re-engage the parking brake, reinstall the wheels, lower the car back down to the ground, and enjoy your new pads. If you got aggressive brake pads, make sure to follow the manufacturer's bedding procedure. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash the subscribe button and leave a comment for any DIY you'd like to see in the future.